Did you know that Lewis Hamilton discovered a structural defect in the Ferrari SF-25 that could be the real reason why Scuderia does not compete for victories this season? What exactly was what saw the 7-time champion that even his engineers could not anticipate? Stay, because what he revealed in Austria can change everything. What was lived in the training of the 2025 Austria Grand Prix was much more than a simple technical anomaly. For Ferrari, it was as if the curtain finally ran on a stage that, until then, had preferred to keep in gloom. Lewis Hamilton, newcomer to the team and loading with enormous media expectation, became unintentionally the protagonist of a revelation that no Maranello engineer could clearly foresee. Because when someone like him, with more than 2 decades of experience and 7 titles in their history, begins to notice erratic patterns in the behavior of the car, the logical thing is not to ignore it. It is to light all the possible alarms. From the first round in the Red Bull Ring, the SF-25 showed signs of a worrying disconnection between its design theory and the reality on track. What should be a day to validate crucial updates ended up becoming a containment session. Hamilton was forced to return multiple times to boxes, afflicted by intermittent problems with the gearbox that not only limited their effective time on the track, but also prevented a complete analysis of the new soil that Ferrari had specifically brought for that event. Each lost return was another fact that was not recorded, an opportunity that faded between frustration and technical silence. But the most striking was not the mechanical problem itself, but Hamilton's emotional and verbal response when getting out of the car. His statement was accurate, without ornaments or excuses. A huge amount of work was destined to bring the floor, but as you can see, our competitiveness did not necessarily change. It was the voice of reason colliding frontally with the official narrative of progress that Ferrari had sustained for weeks. What followed was even more forceful. The car does not feel bad, but we are a big piece behind in terms of rhythm. Those words, pronounced with the measured but forceful tone of a champion, revealed the most important crack. It was not a matter of sensations, but of absolute performance, of results that simply did not arrive. That training day exposed more than a technical defect. He evidenced that the SF-25 was working inside a completely different window than the one that had been conceived. And Hamilton understood it before anyone else, even before Leclerc himself, who was just beginning to notice that the changes proposed by the team had no impact on track. It was as if the new Ferrari pilot had uncovered an uncomfortable secret that had been taking time within the laboratories and wind tunnels in Maranello, but now, in front of the cameras and the timing times, it could no longer be hidden. Ferrari not only faced a technical setback. What Austria left on the table was the confirmation of a structural dissonance between the car and the track, between the simulation theory and the crudeness of the asphalt. A disconnection that neither the new pieces, nor the talent of their pilots, nor the historical reputation of the team could hide. The crisis was not imminent, it was already underway. And Hamilton, with every word he pronounced, did nothing but make it clear. To really understand why Ferrari's SF-25 has been caught in a performance crisis, you must first look beyond visible track behavior. You have to enter the technical heart of the car, in those dark areas of the design where a seemingly innovative decision can become an irreversible limitation. And that is exactly what has happened with the rear suspension system and interaction with soil aerodynamics. The problem is not in a broken piece or a poorly installed component. The problem is how the car is conceived from its structural nucleus. Ferrari opted for a radical design by 2025, maintained the pull rod type rear suspension. An architecture that, on paper, offered aerodynamic advantages for allowing greater diffuser packaging and optimizing the airflow to the rear of the car. But this decision also brought with it a series of mechanical commitments that are now gaining invoice. The first and most serious is the lack of structural rigidity suffered by the rear train. Under extreme lateral load conditions, for example, in fast curves such as Spielberg, the suspension does not resist properly, generating a deformation that dynamically changes the geometry of the car. That means that the SF-25 literally deforms in motion. Its behavior varies according to the level of load to which it is submitted, making it impossible to predict exactly how it will behave when it stops or turns. For a pilot like Hamilton, accustomed to a car with a stable and predictable platform, this characteristic is especially frustrating. It forces him to readapt constantly, even within the same curve. It is like running on a tightrope, where each direction compromises the stability of the car. The second major friction point is found on the floor of the car, redesigned for Austria with a series of innovations that, under ideal conditions, should have offered a qualitative leap in aerodynamic load. Side fences were introduced with more aggressive profiles, a central vaulted central section that expanded the tunnels of the soil effect, and a volumetrically large diffuser. Everything pointed to a substantial improvement. But the problem was that these modifications depended completely on the car operating at a very specific minimum height. And due to the structural problems of the rear, Ferrari was forced to raise the general management height of the car. And there is a last factor, the thermal sensitivity of the floor. The new SF25 floor not only needs an exact height, it also depends on a very narrow temperature window to work. Any deviation, whether by climate, tire strategy, or even running waste, can cause a sudden loss of aerodynamic load. This forces Ferrari to modify the configuration in real time, further complicating the work of track engineers. When Lewis Hamilton finished the free training session in Austria and spoke to the media, his message was not only clear, it was devastating. He did not raise his voice, he did not directly accuse anyone, but the weight of his words pierced as a spear the layer of artificial optimism that Ferrari had tried to maintain since the season began. He said what everyone inside the garage feared listening. The car as it is not competitive. No matter how much it has been invested in aerodynamic developments, or how many hours have passed in simulators, the SF25 is not at the level. And if there is something more dangerous than bad news, it is supported by the technical criteria of a 7-time world champion. The impact was immediate. Internally, Maranello's engineers were forced to review each of the simulations made from the preseason. What until that moment was considered an adjustment phase became defined as a technical emergency. The updates taken to Austria with a new floor, expanded tunnels and modifications in the diffuser not only did not work, but exposed that the car cannot operate within its theoretical design. Hamilton's words acted as a catalyst for a structural review of the complete project. It was not about refining adjustments or choosing the compounds better. The problem was the entire concept on which the SF25 had been built. But this technical earthquake also unleashed an emotional and strategic tinder within Ferrari. Because Hamilton is not just any pilot. It is a global figure that, with each phrase, defines editorial lines, influences development and reconfigured decisions the story of the season. His entrance to the team was sold as the beginning of a new era. One was that, if it is not managed with intelligence, it can end in accelerated disappointment. For a team that has been without titles for more than a decade, listening to its brand new star to say that, "We are a big piece back in rhythm," is a difficult sentence to digest. In Maranello, these statements forced director Frédéric Vasseur to activate an internal restructuring of priorities. A parallel analysis of the rear suspension design was launched, the wind tunnel data were checked and, according to sources close to the equipment, a complete redesign of the architecture of the rear part for version B of the SF25 or even a radical reinterpretation of the concept for 2026 is already being discussed internally because what Hamilton revealed is not something that is solved with a simple evolution. We are talking about rethinking the whole base of the car. And while all this happens, the human factor begins to creak. Leclerc, who until now had been Ferrari's face in this era of reconstruction, sees how his main role is diluted in front of Hamilton's technical and media authority. Monegasco is still fast, yes, but it is no longer the center of gravity of the project. Now everything revolves around the sensations of Lewis, its diagnoses and its ability to drag the team towards a changed direction. It is a transition of silent but real power. What Austria makes it clear is that Ferrari cannot afford to continue wasting time in false hopes. The calendar does not expect, the points are not given and the rivals will not stop their development. McLaren, Red Bull and Mercedes are already building on solid platforms. Ferrari, on the other hand, is still trying to understand why his car does not do what he should do. And if the team does not react with decision and technical humility, the risk is not just losing this championship. It is losing course for the regulatory change of 2026. The big question is now if Ferrari can put aside his historical pride and listen to who has arrived not only to pilot, but to diagnose and rebuild. Because if there is something that Hamilton has demonstrated at this stage, it is that its greatest value is not only in the steering wheel, but in its ability to identify what others prefer to ignore. Austria was not the beginning of a crisis. It was the revelation of a longly denied truth. And now, everything depends on how Ferrari chooses to answer. Austria was the breakdown. A weekend that not only left figures, data and statements. It was the moment when Ferrari had to look in the mirror and accept an uncomfortable reality. Its car, the SF25, is limited from its route. And the most disturbing thing is not that this happens because Formula One is relentless with technical errors. The truly serious thing is that it has been a newly arrived pilot, Lewis Hamilton, who has been the first to undress the problem publicly. When a figure of its size indicates the structural failures of a car with surgical, The message cannot be ignored or make up. It is a sentence, an urgent invitation to change or disappear. Everything that has been revealed from those free training puts Ferrari at a crossroads. It is no longer about choosing whether to develop the SF25 or wait for the mid-season package. What is at stake is whether the team has the humility and intelligence necessary to completely rethink its technical approach before it is too late. What do you think? Can Ferrari overcome this crisis from within, or are we seeing the beginning of another painful chapter in its long history of broken promises? Leave it in the comments.